traditional Chinese medicine, the elements are not separate, but they're actually phases that blend into each other. And so, even in Eastern medicine, we do not consider January a good time to do anything.
But this phase really responds more to patience than pressure. So water is about regulation, not indulgence, right? So adequate rest.
So, let's talk about some deep shit.
It's lunacy. Lunacy and logic.
With Lilith and Dr. Charlier.
And welcome back, Cosmic Family, to another episode of Lunacy and
Logic.
with your host, Dr. Charlier, an elementary healer bringing ancient wisdom back to a modern age, and your other co-host.
I'm Lilith, your Kundalini alchemist, guiding you through sacred transformations of consciousness. Together, Dr. Charlier and I do this with the integration of traditional Chinese medicine theory, astrology and universal law, spiritual awakening mastery, and last but certainly not least, our connection to God.
Yes. Well, thank you back. Thank you, everyone. So we're excited to kind of change things up a little bit. We are now in the new 2026 calendar year. So we're here to kind of give you a new twist on the our show, where we're really going to go deeper into the elements and really kind of share kind of the wisdom and magic behind the elemental of astrology and traditional Chinese medicine.
Yeah, we're going to be all up in the elements from now onwards, both from a Chinese medicine perspective and an astrology perspective. So we're going to talk about which ones are dominating right now and what that means for us.
Yes. So let us get started into the codes of destiny.
Yeah, so 2026 starts off with earth and water being the dominant elements at play, and this is because we have Mercury, Venus, the Sun, and Mars all in Capricorn, with Uranus retrograding in Taurus. So 5 of the 8 planets in Earth signs, while Saturn and Neptune are finishing off their stint in Pisces, and Jupiter's in Cancer. So the other 3 are all in water signs. And surprise, surprise, North Node is in a water sign and the South Node is in an Earth sign. So right now it's all about earth and water. So let's get deep into this. We're going to explain the principle of the elements and then focus on earth and water, what it means for us right now, and what we can do to get the most out of these energies. So this isn't just abstract astrology or TCM theory. This is why you've likely been feeling some heaviness and maybe you're a bit more in touch with your emotions than normal. So let's get into it.
Cool. So let us break down the 5 elements in traditional Chinese medicine, because it's slightly different from our typical 4 elements in astrology, the Western astrology. And so in traditional Chinese medicine, we have 5 elements. It starts with fire, and that's usually connected to the heart and the small intestine. And then what we say is each of these elements actually generates the next element. And so in traditional Chinese medicine, the elements are not separate, but they're actually phases that blend into each other, right? So the fire element generates the earth, the ash that we see once we burn everything off. What you're left with is the physical material of the earth, right? That's why we get ash, we get soil. And from that soil, when you kind of build up that soil, the earth element, which represents the spleen and the stomach, which is our digestion, if you actually see in the regular world, when you go deeper into the earth, you'll find minerals like gold, like silver. All these minerals are actually developed and cultivated in the earth. And that generates then the mineral element, which becomes metal, because when you actually put minerals together, you can actually form metals, right? And so the metal is connected to the lungs and the large intestine. And so after the lungs, if you see, when you put metal out in the environment, do you guys notice during the morning dew, you start getting water droplets gathering on metal, right? And so that's actually now the next element is metal actually generates water. And this water element is connected to the kidneys and to the bladder, which we also know in medical theory, right? That the kidneys and bladder are actually very connected to the water element in our own bodies. And then from this water, which is what we actually feed into the soil, we then get wood. Wood is the energy that comes out of the soil when it gets water and it turns into these green, lush plants and everywhere that we see on this beautiful planet. And that is considered the liver and the gallbladder. And so finally, with this wood, once we cut down the wood, what do we get? We get fuel for fire. And so that shows how in traditional Chinese medicine, these five elements are actually phases of each other as they generate each of them, and they're creating a circle. And that is how the five element traditional Chinese medicine is connected, and how each of our organs are also connected to these elements.
Yeah, so these elements are in essence processes, not personality archetypes like they are in astrology. So each element, like Charlie has said, governs the organs. We've got associated emotions, we've got tissues, we've got consciousness or a perspective, and then we've got life tasks. So as Charlie has said, he's already mentioned the five elements. So wood generally governs our growth, our direction and vision, because ultimately it's our will to move. So when this is healthy, you're telling yourself, I know where I'm going, I can move. As Charlie has said, the organs are the liver and the gallbladder, the tissues are the tendons, the ligaments, and the eyes. And and the associated emotions are anger and frustration, which ideally, if it's healthy, would be used to channel assertiveness rather than this constant aggression. And when the energy of the wood channel is stagnant, it can lead to depression. While if it's flowing correctly, we have a little bit more clarity. So fire, which as Charlie has said would be the child of wood, it governs our meaning, our joy and connection to others and everything around us. So it's ultimately the element of the Shen or the spirit of love and our inspiration. And when it's healthy, we're telling ourselves life is meaningful, I am connected. So Charlie, you said the organs are the heart and the small intestine. The tissues are the blood vessels, the circulation, and the tongue. It's associated with joy. And if this is not balanced, you can feel maybe a little bit more anxiety. But when this flowing energy is flowing correctly, when the energy is not flowing correctly, sorry, we can experience more insomnia, mania, maybe feel a little bit empty or depleted. And then earth, which is the child of fire and the one that's dominating now, as Charlie has said, it turns to ashes and goes back to the earth. Um, this governs nourishment, safety, and of course, embodiment. It's essentially that element of centering, grounding, and mother energy, right? Because the earth supports us. This is like Charlie has said, the child of fire. So this energy is really the energy that's dominating right now. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about this later on in the episode. But basically, it governs our nourishment, safety, and of course, embodiment. It's essentially the element of centering and grounding and mother energy. So don't get confused with astrology, which has Cancer, a water sign, and ruled by the moon as the mother energy. We're not talking about the Chinese medicine elements. So here, earth is the mother energy. So when our earth energy is healthy, we tell ourselves, I am supported, I can receive. The organs are the spleen and the stomach. Its tissues are the muscles and digestion. Its associated emotions are worry and rumination. So if this energy is not healthy, it leads to overthinking, codependency, and fatigue, or even heaviness in the body, which we'll get to a little bit later on in the episode. The fourth element is metal. So metal is essentially the element of the soul or Po and of discernment. So it generally governs our boundaries and releasing or letting go. So like what needs to be contained, what needs to be released. So when this energy is healthy, we tell ourselves, I know what matters, I can let go. Its organs, like Charlie has said, is the lungs and the large intestine. Its tissues are the skin and the breath. Its emotions are grief and sadness. And if our mental energy is healthy, it provides us with clarity. If that grief and sadness has been properly processed, but if it hasn't been processed adequately, we generally are rigid, detached, and feel like a prolonged sense of loss. And then lastly, we have that water element, which is also the other element dominating right now. This is, as Charlie explained, it is the child of metal. So it generally governs our survival, depth, and our destiny, because it's our ancestral memory and our soul will, our je, or how do you pronounce it, Charlie?
How do you spell that?
ZHI.
Yeah, so ZH sounds like j, like a J.
Yeah. Okay. So when this energy is healthy, we tell ourselves, I trust life, I endure. Um, as Charlie has said, the kidneys and the bladder are the organs, its tissues are the bones, bone marrow, which also includes the brain, and the ears. Its emotions are fear. And so if this fear is integrated, it turns into wisdom. If not, we can feel like existential fear and exhaustion. So those are all five elements, how they flow into each other, the way Charlie had explained, and what they are in a nutshell. So if we go back to the current energies that are primarily earth and water, we see that this isn't a manifest faster phase, even though earth is an embodiment phase. It's a digest, feel, and reroute phase. So if you're feeling heavy, slow, emotional, tired, or uncertain, it's not failure, Oaks, it's elemental.
Yes, yes. And one thing too about a traditional Chinese medicine, slightly different from astrology, but it's still very similar in the same context, is that in astrology you will always go through the four elements. Same thing with traditional Chinese medicine, but it's just really on what scale we're talking about. So when we're talking about in generalization astrology, we're talking about the sun and the moon. So we're talking about 24-hour cycle to a whole year. We can also talk about that specifically in our daily life, how astrology through the time of the day goes through the astrology. That's kind of how you see the rising sign of the element. In traditional Chinese medicine, the five elements is the cycle of a 24-hour period on top of a whole day cycle. However, when we're practicing our medicine, we're looking at you through the lens of a 24-hour health cycle. And so the five elements will generate through the five elements throughout the day. And so health happens when each of the elements are generating and sending the energy correctly. If you're getting 100% wood in 1 hour, in the next 2 3 hours, you should be passing 100% energy to the fire element. Sickness happens when that transition is not happening correctly. So if the 100% of the element of wood is not being passed on to 100% of fire, maybe because this is now when we talk about in the fire element, maybe you're getting frustrated, maybe you're getting angry. Any of that anger and frustration, which is activating the liver, which is the wood element, you start to decrease your wood ability, and so you're not sending 100% wood element to the fire element. So this is how we say when the liver is attacked or if the liver is being excess, right? So in the element, you either have excess wood, which is too much wood, right? Or you have very little wood. And so when you have excess wood, the liver is overactive, causing anger, right? And this is kind of what we mentioned why there's emotions connected to each of the organs. When you're getting underdeveloped liver, you actually don't want to do anything because you just don't have the energy, the yang, the movement energy of the wood that wants you to move. You don't have the energy to move. So what happens is you kind of get depressed. So what happens is when you're not angry, you get kind of depressed. You just don't have the energy to like do anything. And so that's very important because what we're doing is we're talking about when we overdo an organ, right? So let's say um, we're overeating, right? When you're overindulging in food, your stomach, the earth element, gets overabundant. That means that it can pull from the fire element, or it can actually make the next element, which is the sun of earth, which is metal, gets overactive. So what happens when you overindulge? It actually takes away from the metal, which is our breathing. And so what you find out is usually when you overeat, you have a hard time breathing, right? Because your whole diaphragm is now overabundant and your diaphragm cannot go up and down, causing you to have regular breath. So this is where each of these elements affect another element. And that is what we focus on in traditional Chinese medicine is we look at your condition, we look at your body, your eyes, your tongue, your pulse to see which element is being under developed or over excess developed. And when that happens, you start to break out of homeostasis, is what we talk about in the West and the East. Is homeostasis is a Western word for balance in the elements in Chinese medicine. And so really what we're talking about. So now when we're talking about astrological transits, when we say that the planetary are now sending earth and water to us, that means in your 5 element chart, you're going to get an abundance of earth and water. So if you're already overeating, if you're already over drinking or not processing water, those 2 elements will start to overact on your elements in you, causing you to have a disease, right? Causing you to be out of ease, out of comfort, to become dis-ease, right? Out of ease. And so those are kind of what we talk about. So when we're really talking about, even in astrology, is when you have already a natural affinity for earth and water, you're going to do well in the earth and water, but what's going to suffer is the fire, air elements. And so astrology is slightly different because they work more like, if we look at light versus paint, one is additive light, one is subtractive light. It's similar in the Eastern tradition. We're kind of looking at this blending of energy, but in astrology, it is like energy support each other until it's too much as well. And so those are the things that we're talking about when we talk about the collective astrology, because we want you to understand that right now you'll notice earth and water elements are doing better than maybe a fire element who may not have a lot of water. So during this time, they may feel like they're drowning, right? And so I would say, like, during this time when we were just talking about all these things in earth element, air signs in general, Gemini, Libra, Aquarians, are probably going to have a harder time, because at this time, we're all kind of focusing on grounding, being logical, being materialistic, understanding our safety in the physical world. Where the air signs are like, I want to talk about random shit. And they're like, no, Charlie, we don't have time to talk about random shit right now. We need to get grounded. You are too much in the air, right? Some people call it, you're too woo woo. You're too heads in the cloud, because your mind is going to the air element, to thinking, overthinking, rather than right now when we're talking about that Capricorn energy. And that Capricorn energy comes with this, like, minimize earth too. It doesn't want to be overabundant of earth. It wants to be minimizing earth, so you're much more better with your foundation. So those are how they are similar, but then there's slight differences, and that's how we're actually trying to bring this into scope for everyone, because understanding the astrology as well as your own constitution, both in Chinese medicine and astrology, will give you a better understanding of what you're feeling at this time. That's why we bring up the codes of destiny, because you might be feeling suddenly like very emotional during this time. That means that we should all, those who are very good at earth water elements, are much better at now sitting down with those who don't have a lot of water and say, hey, let's talk and cry things out, because you have a hard time crying and feeling, and I'm a water sign and I can sit down and cry with you to help you process your feelings, right? And so that's how we, if we understand really the elements in both a Eastern and a Western concept, we're really able to bridge the really how spirit really is working through all of us and the elements.
Yeah, so the goal when Earth is dominant is digestive support, body based practices, minimal stimulation, like Charlie had just said, and slow consistency. Minimal stimulation, because this, which we'll cover in the next episode as we move into air being more dominant energy from an astrological perspective, because this is, stimulating the mind, and like you just explained. But with Earth, if somebody's trying to think their way out during Earth dominance, you're just going to get more stuck, right? So, from an astrological point of view, the Earth signs are Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. So, with Capricorn and Taurus being the signs that are dominating right now, our themes are work, money, discipline, responsibility. Don't even get me started why they made the Christmas holidays during Capricorn season. Because this is the season we have no discipline, we don't want to work, and we have no fucking money because we've spent it all. So I blame Constantine, but you can let us know in the comments who you blame. Because this was obviously done by somebody that did not want the masses to succeed, as far as I'm concerned. And so here we are.
Romans.
Yes.
The Romans.
Luckily, you all have me and Dr. Charlie here to help you get through this time without letting this conflict between the energies and the practicality of life at this time of year take you down.
Yes.
But so, I mean, the point is, we can conclude at least that earth energies show us where life is asking us to be more practical rather than idealistic.
I love how you brought up New Year's too, because that's a very important concept that we need to really share with everybody, because we really do have to reconsider reprogramming, reconstructing our daily lives to actually match both the energetic of astrology as well as our own constitutional energetics. And so, even in Eastern medicine, we do not consider January a good time to do anything. We actually follow a 13 moon calendar in the East, so if you guys pay attention, that's also astrological because we're following the moon cycle. So even traditional Chinese medicine is following some kind of planetary movement. And so in the 13 moon cycle, our New Year's or Lunar New Year or Chinese New Year, whatever you want to call it these days, that time usually happens around the Aquarian age, or one, sorry, or when the Aquarian time. Usually that's when we get that 13th moon time. So around the new moon in Aquarius is usually when we actually celebrate Lunar New Year. So you guys, usually it's at the end of January, early February, sometimes March, rarely March. And that's because that is getting past that winter month when it's freezing and cold. And we already just said we're getting very grounded, we're removing things out of our lives. That is not a good time to start having New Year's resolution, because this is why no one gets any New Year's resolution resolved, because everybody wants to overthink, over dramatize what their New Year's will be. And Capricorn's like, no, cut shit out. Like, don't do any of that. Don't do any of that crazy shit. Just go and really actually, I find that it's a really good time. Capricorn tells you to like buckle down and only focus on what's very important to you when winter is at its max right now. No one's going outside to play unless you're snowboarding.
A very Snowboarding is a very Capricorn exercise, by the way. So perfect time to be snowboarding.
Then there you go, skiing and snowboarding. Because I do feel like when I am snowboarding, I am connecting to the snow, but there's almost this reflection because there's not a lot of things growing and life is not growing. So in a way, we have to you really have to depend on your own energy. You don't even have the sun to heat you up, so you also have to carry your own heat, right? And so I feel like Capricorn, it teaches us self-reliance, right? It teaches you how to be independent. And so during this time when we like want to like do all these new things in astrology, I mean, in the New Year's, in the Gregorian calendar, it's actually not energetically supporting us to have New Year's resolution. So that's why we would say, actually, for astrology, it is Aries, follows Easter, just like the Christians. And then for the East, we follow the moon calendar. So usually around February is when we actually celebrate. So this year we are going to celebrate around February 17th and 19th is when we're celebrating our Lunar New Year. So January is not something to be celebrating, but it's something to be really internalizing your own foundations.
I mean, that's brilliantly said. What I was going to start off with was that the good news is that Earth does mean slow progress, financial pressure, feeling stuck or burdened, focusing on our obligations, and opposing Cancer, of course, means, a balance has to be found between all of this and our home. So this, in fact, does sound like a lot like Christmas season. I'll give Constantine that, or the Romans. So we're not far off track. But I just want you guys to know we're not being punished. We should rather see this as a time, like Charlie has said, of building foundations for the upcoming year. And as he said, that doesn't mean your New Year's resolutions now. I do my New Year's resolutions at the astrological New Year, or the equinox in March. But this is a great time to be focusing on the inner and building those foundations for the upcoming year, thinking about what you want to be building next and so forth.
Yes, exactly. And then so the extra piece that we're getting in this timeline is actually this water element, specifically in what we're talking about, the codes of destiny, where we have some elements in water. We're not saying that water is a general term for this new year, or this new year of the Gregorian calendar. But astrologically, right now we are at getting more water, and so it is actually also telling us that our emotions are very important to pay attention to that. I would say clearing your emotions, paying attention to what makes you upset very easily or makes you scared. When we talked about earlier, the five emotions connected to five elements, water is connected to fear. But to conquer fear, you need willpower. And that's why it's a very important time for us to actually release the fears or pay attention to what makes us afraid during this time, because that's when you can actually alchemize, transmute that fear into the fuel that fuels your willpower to not be afraid and to do the things that you've been afraid for so long, to finally do it. Right. And that's why during this time, you're not taking action yet. You're just processing the fear. So by the time Aquarius, Aries, or I'm sorry, Pisces, Aries comes around, you've really thought about what you're afraid of, and Aries gives you the courage, that fire, to move forward into the new year, to take that fear and turn it into willpower yourself. So that's why it's very important for us to understand, like, this right now is, again, pay attention to emotions. Don't right now, if you're also getting depressed, that's why depression is connected to the earth element, because when you're getting depressed, it's almost like you're so overwhelmed by the material, the physical, right? And so the earth feels very heavy. So that's why, like, to if you're feeling heavy, that means you're putting on too much material pressure, right? And so this is a good time, like Capricorn's telling you, shut it down, take things out of your life, because right now the whole world is shut down because it's winter and no one's going out and about. I mean, unless you're in a tropical area, but most of the world is filled with, half of the world is filled with winter. And so there's not a lot of energy to go about and do something, right? So when we talk about, even in TCM, spring brings the energy of movement. That spring shows up around Aries. So that's why right now, winter season in TCM is the cold. It's the water season. It's telling you, focus on the fears that you've had, that you've been building up from the life. Focus on the lymphatic water in your body, because this is when it's cold outside. What happens to the water inside of us? It starts to get ice, right? And when that water becomes icy, that's when you get these little, we tend to have a lot of stiff neck. We commonly say, and we see a lot of people get stiff neck during this time, because the wind cold is kicking in during this winter season, and suddenly now you have like shoulder pains, or your joints start to ache. That's because the fluids in your body are starting to get cold and becoming ice.
Well, and Capricorn is also cold energy, and it's associated with the joints. So exactly.
Yes, exactly. So now you can see that, like, now that you pay attention to the elements and each of the um, energy of astrology and TCM, you'll notice that they're actually all matching each other to kind of warn us, or no, prepare us to pay attention that we should not be going around in shorts and shirt going, yes, let's go and start something new, right? And find no one follow you because everyone's at home, like, freezing and like trying to like process last year's issues or last year's. That's why, like, it's a really good time for us during this time to do a lot of self-reflection, a lot of journaling, see how your life went this past year, so that you can kind of say, oh, I didn't like this, I want to take it out of my life. So Capricorn's really good at supporting the cut that out of your life, cut that out of your life, so that you are lighter by the time the spring comes around.
No, but exactly. I mean, water energy is the energy of emotional truth and inner movement. So, yeah, the goal is to allow that release. And we can do this through, like Charlie said, that emotional processing, which you can do by getting enough sleep. We've got Neptune in Pisces. So, this is double sleep energy, y'all. Getting enough sleep, doing that trauma informed care, which is essentially what Charlie was saying, having that containment. Usually, I would say less structure with water, but with Saturn, the ruler of Capricorn, being in Pisces, a water sign, I think in this case we need to add a little bit more structure in the form of embodiment. Which we can do beautifully by focusing a bit more on yin practices and movements, which we'll go into a little bit more in sacred medicine. And the good news is, as Charlie said, that this is not the time to be pushing productivity. So relax and enjoy. Okay. Um, I mean, I know Capricorn is the focus of money and all of that, but uh, how do you want to address that contradiction, Charlie?
Well, I would say your wealth is really in the people that you have surrounding you, right? And so water is a connecting element. It connects people together. So it is a good time to connect to family, connected to the people around you. However, buying shit for them, I think this is where we've taken too far, because now we've actually, if you've noticed, like when we're supposed to be spending time with family, what we end up doing is getting too overwhelmed for buying things for them. And then you see like all the stores blowing up, trying to like go crazy, trying to buy stuff for their family, where actually family time is the gift of your presence and connecting. And so water element is all about, hey, let's cry together and fall in love with each other again during this time when we're all probably at home, staying warm and cozy, but really celebrating together, not just giving gifts to each other. Because that's where, like, the whole giving gifts to each other is actually not a very Capricorn energy, because Capricorn is more like, no, you're here with me right now. And so our time together is more precious, that we're spending time physically in each other's presence, and maybe cleaning up the house together, or like building foundation together, so that maybe in the new year we're together and doing things together, right? So it is an important time for us to kind of have that watery element to connect. But Capricorn doesn't want us to. Sagittarius, and that's why like Sagittarius may have been like a little loose with their money, and that's why people want to overbuy things right in the early December. By the time the winter solstice kicks in, we should just be sitting down with our family and spending time and connecting with them.
Yeah, so the water signs is Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. So, as we've already said, this is the energy of emotions, but it's also the energy of memory, like Charlie said, bonding, and also intuition. So, this is really telling us how we feel, how to feel safe, and how we feel being alive. So when this water energy is dominant, it shows up as like having these emotional waves. We can have old memories resurfacing, good or bad. We can have fatigue, which may not even have an obvious cause to us, a desire to withdraw, this heightened sensitivity. So during a water phase, uh, feeling more is not going backwards. Okay, I know we're all trying to be balanced and not reactive and to be the observer, but during a water phase, we need to feel, and especially with Jupiter in Cancer, you're not going to be able to avoid this even if you tried anyway. So you're not going backwards, you're simply unfreezing right now.
Yes, yes. And the reason why we always talk about transits and cycles, even in TCM, we're talking about the phases of the elements, is because life is always moving. When we breathe, we have to take an in breath and an out breath. You cannot breathe with only in breaths. You can't breathe with only inhale. That means even in our own life, you have to have a time of productivity and a time for rest, right? So even like the daytime, we go and do stuff, but in the nighttime, we go and rest. Even in TCM, the daytime you're have full of energy, and so it was natural for us to be productive. When the nighttime comes, following circadian rhythm, we should be getting ready to go to sleep, right? And so when you look at now the whole year as a day, then when there is a lot of sun energy, fire energy, then we should be out and about being more productive. But then we have to then, when during the winter kicks in, we have to start resting our body so that our body is regenerating itself, so that by the time spring and summer comes, we're much more productive. So it's very important that we follow these transits, because it is us living in this, in the flow of nature. We talk about a lot of this in spiritual circles. You're like, oh, you need to surrender, you need to surrender. Yes, but surrendering actually doesn't tell you to be passive. It tells you to be actively choosing to flow with what's happening. So that means that winter comes in, you're not going around starting a business. You're not going around telling everybody, hey, you guys should follow me, do this, do this, do this. That's not flowing, and that's not you surrendering to literally winter, right? And so when winter kicks in, I'm telling you, you don't have to go about like going, oh, I'm going to fight winter, but like you are now surrendering to winter. But you're not just sitting there freezing your ass off saying, oh, I'm surrendering to winter, I'm just going to die now. No, warm up, put on, get a fireplace, get some hot cocoa, put on some warm jackets. But you're still surrendering to winter, but you are still actively choosing to work with that natural flow. And when you do that, and then we add structure to surrender, and that's when you're actually flowing. So you still need structure, like that Capricorn energy during this time, for you to make sure that you have a home, you have wood to burn, you have a nice warm jacket to stay warm, because without that structure, the winter will kill you, right? Many people die during winter and summer because those are the most two extreme temperatures.
Charlie, you're keeping it all light and chirpy about death.
Exactly. Keeping life. Yes, life and death just happens all the time, right? Winter is a very important time because we have, I mean, this is when the elders struggle a lot, right? Because of the winter, they have a hard time staying warm, right? And so this is where we as family members can keep our, elders warm, while the kids, they're like, you've seen kids, they're like, oh my god, I'm not cold, mom, I'm not cold, dad. And the parents are like, put on these damn coat, kids, like you don't understand how cold it is. And that's like our parents putting on a jacket is like Capricorn putting on structure so that we can go outside and surrender to winter, so we can throw some snowballs at each other, right? And that's kind of how it is important for us to really pay attention to the elemental transits of both astrology and traditional Chinese. And I really say indigenous practices. All nature indigenous practices worked with the elements of the environment and the weather, right? And so we understood seasons to be the elemental transits. That's why you see all practices follow and understand the seasons in our own time flow or circadian rhythm in our own health in our own bodies.
Yeah, so now when we combine these elements of earth and water, we have like earth being the container energy and water is the content inside that container. So we can really say that this phase is about, like we've said before, rebuilding safety, with Capricorn stabilizing that nervous system. It's a stabilizing energy, teaching discernment, ending this fantasy based momentum, right? Because you're doing inner work, preparing for clarity later without rushing now. So what I've seen, what people tend to do with these energies is they generally want to force motivation. I mean, in my opinion, this really comes from feeling guilty about not being productive, right? But you guys know now that you don't have to feel guilty because this is a time of slow progress and consistency rather than outright productivity, which will in any way make you feel like you're taking 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. If you're not going to listen to me, by all means, try it for yourself. They also tend to compare themselves to others. They try and think their way out of the situation because it's moving too slow, if at all. Um, and the biggest problem with that is mainly because they're interpreting slowness as failure rather than just as the flow of the energies, like Charlie was saying, through the elemental cycles. And so then they want to escape, either through spirituality with Saturn in Pisces or productivity, as we say again. But this phase really responds more to patience than pressure. So
Yeah, and so taking that into account too of the earth and water mixing together, it is in traditional Chinese medicine the spleen and the kidneys, right? And so the kidneys and bladder are very important because of the water element. So in traditional Chinese medicine, this is where we're drinking a ton of tea, a ton of soups, right? We all love hot soup. I'm a big pho fan. We just had some pho the other day. That's because pho is a soup that is built with this bone broth. That bone broth brings all the materials that you need to put into your marrow, into your body to heat you up. So actually, then the earth element, which is your spleen and stomach, is a very good time for us to be overeating because that eating actually heats us up, keeps us warm during the water season. And so this is why like people who try to fast during winter, dumb. This is very, very unhealthy for you. No one should be doing cold plunges right now. I mean, if you want to, you should just go outside and do a cold plunge. You don't need to do a cold plunge in the house, but like this is a good time if you tend to be a very hot and fiery person. So if you have a ton of inflammation, and I would say if you're a woman, do not do a cold plunge during this time. Okay, period. We can save that for another time, but it's a very good time for us to actually, if you're an overheated an inflammation type person, then winter is a good time for you to chill out by going into doing a cold plunge, letting your kidneys reset, but then drink hot tea with uh, kidney supporting drinks, right? Kidney teas. But yeah, so this is an important time for us to pay attention to our digestion as well, because we're processing food. And so that's very important for us to eat during this time to stay warm.
So with that in mind, Charlie is already getting ahead of the game. So let's not waste any time. Let's move on over into sacred medicine and see what are the lifestyle tips we can incorporate to harness these energies.
So yeah, it's very important time for us to pay attention again to what I was saying with the earth element. And I've noticed this often. I was in California. Everybody loved their raw diet where they're just eating raw vegetables, right? But the stomach, the spleen doesn't like cold. It actually likes heat and warmth, right? And that's why we joke about this. But like, if you notice, like every Asian person that goes into a restaurant, they always ask for water, no ice, or usually hot water or sometimes tea, right? Is because the warm water is actually supporting your digestion. Because actually what people don't realize is, for your water, for the water that you drink, right, at room temperature, to reach the level it needs to be hydrating you in your body, it needs to go from, like, what is it, room temperature, what, 70 degrees, right? 70, 75 degrees. So if that water is 75 degrees, it needs to go up to 98.7 degrees to then be absorbed in the body. And so I find this commonly where a lot of this health fads today is like drinking room temperature water, and people walk around with these 1 2 gallons of water as if like they just learned that like water's like super important. But what happens is that room temperature requires so much energy to process in the digestion. And so this is why if you overburden digestion during this time, that digestion is not creating fuel to keep you warm during the winter. That is why you should not be eating cold salads. You should not be eating raw foods. We should be eating cooked food that is cooked by fire. That fire, that chi, that transform the food, that heat is still in the food. So when you eat that food, your digestion goes, wow, that was so easy to digest. Now send all this food into the body to build fat. We need fat during the winter because that's our natural coat of warmth. We need more fluids because the fluids that are moving will keep the cold from like really coming into the body, right? And so, and then eating warm food with the Capricorn energy or the Earth energy is eating really like vegetables. Eat it cooked, right? You should not be eating sushi during this time. Seafood is not a good time during this time because seafood is considered cold because it's been in the ocean. So even if you heat up seafood, and notice that like we don't heat up seafood to the point where we cook meat, which is hot.
Well, you can eat cooked fish because we've got quite heavy Pisces energy. So I think cooked fish would be good. That would be a very nice mixture of earth and water energy,
Yes,
actually.
but this is where I would say then it has to be fatty cooked fish. Not so there's certain
Correct.
fishes that are not as thick. So like salmon are really um oily, and that's why we talk about omega 3s and omega 6 in the oils of fish, because that oil is actually what keeps the cold away. Because that's why, if you notice, actually polar bears, seals, killer whale, all these animals in the water that live in the Arctic Ocean have a ton of blubber, whale fats, blubber, warm oils. So that oil is what keeps you warm during the winter. So that is why I would say very, very much pay attention to what you're eating and make sure it's warm, make sure it's soupy, make sure it's easily digestible, because that will support you during this next month and 2 months. And that's in general. On top of that, you have this astrological overlay. And that's when we can say, like, right now, there's a Piscean energy, a Scorpio energy.
Not Scorpio. We've got Pisces and Cancer.
Oh, yes, Pisces and Cancer. Yes, exactly. So Pisces and Cancer, right, are much more of the metaphor because we're not necessarily eating crabs during this time. And plus, crabs are not actually readily available during this time, right? As well as Pisces with the fish, right? But this is again where the fish actually supports the lymphatic, which is connected to Pisces. And so lymphatic is what needs to be moving during the winter right now. And so those are kind of like what I would say are the most important things to share with people. Get a lot of pho and get pho that has a lot of oil, okay? A lot of people kind of get upset that like, oh, oil makes you fat. Actually, oil does not make you fat. Seed oil, yes, but like raw oils or oils are cold press are much better because the oils is the hydrophobic part of the cells, and that's actually oils goes into your brain. You guys know your brain is made of oil. So if we're not drinking and eating oils that is connected to meats, then we're actually not getting the meat fats that we need to create the warmth for the winter and support our brain function during the winter, because at this time we're regenerating because we use our brain function so much during the summer because we're active, we're thinking about new ideas. During the winter we should be really just internalizing, eating to replenish ourselves.
Yeah, I would say, like, in terms of more specific stuff as well, well, more specific, general, more specific types of foods for Capricorn is the most important is minerals, right? Because, like Charlie, you said, those minerals are from the earth. A lot of protein, so even putting like protein powder in whatever you can will also help. And vitamin C is also very good to get during Capricorn season. The other thing is it would be good to reduce overthinking. So just do like one practical thing per day, simplify your schedules, and keep it simple. For exercises, I would say we've already said snowboarding and skiing, but this is the point. If you imagine that Capricorn is like that goat, right? That mountain climbing goat. So you could do like, long walks, hiking, trail walks up the mountains, maybe even with like a weighty backpack on. Very, very Capricorn as well. Would be amazing to be doing right now. A lot of winter sports actually. So you guys are cut out for this energy.
Are these the people that are climbing the Himalayas and all those like tall mountains during this time because it's like trying to like conquer the cold?
No, no, you can just do normal hiking in the mountains. I mean, I go walking up the mountains.
Yeah, I'm just joking, but
It can be an incline or a decline, like up or down.
yeah. How about water?
Yeah, so well, water is about regulation, not indulgence, right? So adequate rest, we've already spoken about. You've still got that cold energy, so here it's wet. So you're talking more about warm baths, like warm water rituals. This is why Charlie has said, do not do cold plunges right now. You can journal about your emotions without analyzing them. Just journal about them. Gentle boundaries, so this is really about maintaining respect for others and for yourself while trying to protect and instill your boundaries, but most importantly, let those feelings pass without acting them out. And actually, this is exactly what journaling will help with. For those of you that think journaling are useless, journaling is exactly there to help you process those emotions.
You guys want free therapy? Get a piece of paper and pen and just write, y'all. You don't even judge what's coming out of your thoughts in your as you're writing. This is we talk about this called automatic writing. You have to just dump the thoughts in your mind. And this is where I find a lot of practices in meditation. People think that they can actually process their thoughts just by thinking about it. No. This is why the practice of meditation is actually to look at it and then just let it go. Look at it and let it go. A lot of times people don't even want to look at it. And when you don't look at it, what happens? It gets more annoying. It gets like it slaps you in the face, right? Same thing as whatever you don't want to deal with, you want to resist, it will persist, right? And so this time of journaling is again a no judgment space for you to just write everything in your thoughts. And if you do, you'll notice that those thoughts don't come back because you've manifested the thoughts in your writing, but you didn't speak them because you're trying not to make them manifest. You're just trying to reflect on what's in your mind. And once you start to reflect what's in your mind, you can read and say, wow, I did not know I have these thoughts. And then you get to choose, maybe I should not have these thoughts at all, right? And that's when you're able to have that self reflection meditation to eventually have no thoughts in your head. A lot of people want to say, "Oh, meditation is all about not having any thoughts." That's what you do at level 10. Most people start at level 1, which is they don't know how to process their thoughts because they're thinking about their thoughts. They're not writing and expressing their thoughts, right? And that is why journaling is so important. Please don't call it a diary. I think the West has made diaries sound so bad. And so, like, people are made fun of when you say, "Oh, you have a diary." Dude, a journal is therapy, y'all. So if you're making fun of therapy, then you're the one probably spending a ton of money seeing a random person telling you what's wrong with you, where you could just write on a piece of paper and see what you're dealing with.
Yo, queens have to have journals. Kings and queens are required to have journals. So
If you want to be in control of your life, you have to journal. That I will tell you 100%. And I work with many patients. Those who journal have the fastest ability to change their lives. Those who don't, you'll start seeing them in the clinic all day long.
even if it's just one sentence a day, like at the end of each day.
Yes, exactly. That simple practice of just releasing those thoughts on paper, it's super potent. And I feel like with the advent of the internet, with the advent of the computers and typing, a lot of people type their journal. I do too, but there's also power in writing with your hand. And so this is kind of actually the power of cursive. You know, we joke about this because today most kids do not know how to write in cursive. And so they can't even read cursive letters. And I find that actually cursive writing is using both your right and left brain to actually process thoughts and emotions. So, as much as it is good to type, it is also much more potent to be able to write yourself because it's almost like you're connecting your mind and your ability to make letters rather than to type a keyboard that very redundant da, 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 right. You're doing the same da, 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 da. You're making letters, but when you're typing writing, that cursive is moving your hand, is connecting to your brain. So that's what I would say, like, it's very important for us to have, and Capricorn tells you, meditate on the simple things. Don't meditate on what you're going to do in 6 months, in 2 months. No, meditate on the fact that, like, you're not breathing correctly. You're having stress right now. You're overthinking this. You're overeating or you're undereating. Those are simple things that you can learn about yourself. And that's why during this time it's a really good time to be self-reflective because you start to learn more about yourself, and then you can choose in the coming year to actually drop things that you don't think are good for you and pick up things that are good for you, right? Because you have the space during winter that you dumped all the crap that you didn't need that you picked up from the previous year.
Exactly. Should we head on over into the temple door?
Yes, yes.
So it's important during this time not to jump to solutions, visions, or force clarity just yet. If life feels heavy right now, it's because gravity, which is Capricorn, is at work. Earth and water don't move fast, they move truthfully. So if you can imagine like that energy, like, you know, Capricorn is this cold and dry energy, while Pisces is this wet energy. So you can imagine like that heaviness when you jump into the water with your clothes. This, you know, it's a very heavy energy. So if you're feeling heavy, this is completely normal. It's part of the energies. Um, Charlie, do you want to say something still?
No, no, I'm good.
So join us next time because then we're going to talk about the air energy when as that becomes more dominant, how it translates into the five elements of the TCM theory, which does not have an air element, and why thinking changes after feeling, not before.
So thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful day and beautiful week until next time.
And a beautiful 2026.
Yes. Have a beautiful 2026, Gregorian 2026.
Fuck Constantine.
How you know? Damn, Constantine.
Namaste, yo.
Bye, everybody.